Welcome back to the TCL podcast. Here we talk about murder and other forms of crime. I do have a YouTube channel that you can go check out. I also have a Patreon that you can join. And by joining, you'll receive early access to scheduled episodes set to come out. I also have a Patreon I just said Patreon. I also have a merch shop that you can go and check out as well. And for any updates, you can find me on my channel and podcast. You can find on my channel and podcast. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. For this mini-series, I am combining my two favorite things, history and true crime. It is hard to believe that we are halfway through our historical murders mini-series. Today, we are going to be talking about Jess Harding Pomeroy, aka the boyfriend. He was a juvenile with at least 2 to 10 plus victims. That happened on March 18th, April 22nd, 1874. His methodology was stabbing with a knife in Boston. He was later sentenced to life and would be served in solitary confinement in 1876. He commuted to life in prison in 1917, and on September 29, 1932, he died in prison. He was a vicious teenager to be recorded. A young Jesse Pomeroy grew up in one of the worst slums in South Boston in the late 1800s. Anyway, as y'all know, I'm from the South, so I know in California it's like SoCal. In Nashville, it's like SoBro, like Southern Nashville. What is it like? What do you call Southern Boston? South Boston. I'm curious. Anyway. By the time he turned 14, he was convicted of numerous murders, and he was one of the worst multiple killers in the history that was sentenced to spend the rest of his life. Brought up by his widowed mother, a dressmaker, he was not an easy child to miss in the area. He had a hair lip on one of his eyes, and he was completely white. Not sure what that means, but okay. I think I know what that means. And according to one source, he suffered from a light mental breakdown. Not much. I don't like this lighting. Okay, let's try that. Okay. Oh, that's better. Anyway. Not much is known about his early childhood, but by the time he reached 11, he began to torture other young children. In the 2 years of 1871 and 1872, he trapped and attacked 7 boys, all younger than him. In each case, he took each one to a secluded area and stripped the victim and tied them up. The first victim was severely beaten, punched, and knocked until covered with bruises. However, he then began utilizing his knife attacks, slashing and poking with the blade, drawing blood from his victims. Because of his appearance, it wasn't long that the police got an idea who the culprit was, and they proceeded to arrest the 12-year-old, where he was sentenced to a Westboro Reform School, where he was held up till the age of 21. Instead of a 9-year sentence, however, he was let go after 2. While serving his term, he stayed. His behavior had led ward officials into thinking that he was indeed reformed. Of course, because all sociopaths have a way of fooling you, right? Well, he understood very well that he had to do to get out of there as soon as possible and make sure he stuck to his plan. A great example of this was a revolving door imprisonment that has been around a lot longer than people believe. When he got out, he was far from well. As a matter of fact, he was now ready for his crimes to go to a new level. Now, as you can imagine what his next level was, homicide. Exactly. In the March of 1874, 10-year-old Mary Curran disappeared. Her body was mutilated and savagely beaten. 4 months later, a 4-year-old Horace Mullen was taken to Palmerton marshlands outside the town, where the child was slashed repeatedly. Police found the body, with the head almost decapitated the next day. The police began investigating the murder and quickly saw Pomeroy as a potential suspect. Wow! When they approached the young boy, they found him carrying a blood-stained knife and also noted that his shoes were covered in mud. His footprints matched those of the young murder scene, and when they asked him if they killed the boy, Jesse replied almost as a matter of factly, "I suppose I did." Like, sociopath right here, people. Like, come on now. Actually, I think I like that lighting better. Sorry, guys, I don't know what's wrong with the lighting today. Like, normally it's not. I think it's because I'm also in finals weekends, which is like, I'm ready to pull my hair out. But anyway, I'm trying to get this episode done so I can get it at least pre-recorded for y'all. Anyway. So when his mom moved out of the house, soon after, laborers were on the floor found to decompose the remains of Mary Curran, buried in the basement of the earthen floor. Pomeroy easily confessed to that murder. As if it was enough for the police, Pomeroy then confessed to the murder of 27 other victims. When officers began to dig around the home where he grew up, they discovered that the remains of 12 other bodies. Found guilty of murder, he was sentenced to spend the rest of his days in prison, where he languished in solitary confinement until he died, at the ripe old age of 72. An interesting sidebar to all is during his trial, moralists tried to use the young multiple murderer as an example of declining moral standards as they felt were prevalent at the time. They particularly blamed the popular dime novels of the day, where their garish stories of blood and immoral lifestyle, much of the same way that evangelists and preachers try to use their music and media to excuse for youth rebellion today. However, the evangelists in the Boston area, their idea of his vicious crimes were quickly thrown out the window, and stated that he had never read any of the dime novels. Now, keep in mind, in this era, we are constantly hearing about criminals getting younger and younger. And I thought, why not talk about Jesse Pomeroy's to decide to prove kids have been killing other kids for a long time now. I mean, I did an episode on this in my spooky season episode when I talked about the U.S.'s youngest murder, which has now been proven of that century. So this has been going on for a long time. He was born in 1860 in South Boston. He had very striking physical abnormalities, namely a bad hair lip and one eye that was completely white. He also suffered from some sort of I don't like saying that word, but I know, retardation. I just don't like saying that word. It's just mental disability. I guess that's how you would say it. I'm not sure the exact word you would use. I just hate that one word. But no doubt he had to endure some shocking abuse in his early home life, as well as just how cruel kids can be. Hey, kids can be cruel today. Have you ever met a teenage girl? They can be especially cruel. So, that's the episode. What we can do now is at the age of 11 in 1871, he started to show us some very scary signs. At first he would just be his victims, but he grew more confident and he started to cut them. And one reportedly poked pins into a small boy. After he tortured 7 children on his way home, he was caught by police. And at the age of 1872, Jesse was sent to life in the sent to the Westboro Reform School. Excuse me. In March 1874, Mary Curran went missing. The 10-year-old girl found herself in the company of Jesse Pomeory. for a few hours until he became bored with his new toy and killed her. Like, this guy is like truly a sociopath right here. Like, did he just not think? Like, and, like, seriously though, Jesse did not think he was going to get away with this. As the police asked him if he killed the 4-year-old, he said, "I suppose I did." Like, who answers that question like that? Seriously. With no real defense, however, he was found guilty of the 2 original murders, and despite his age, he was sentenced to death. Very smart and very ironic. Luckily, the state realized that it was a little harsh for a 14-year-old retarded boy. I still hate that word, retarded. Mentally incapacitated boy? Oh god, I'm trying to think of the proper word to use that I hate using that word. So, they commuted to life in prison. Like, here's the thing, like, did he know what he was doing? Like, so many things. But, at 41, there were many countless suicide attempts. Common sense prevailed and Jesse was moved to an asylum, where he finally was allowed to see other prisoners. Although his social skills must have totally gone by that time, so what were these interactions? Why don't we talk about the wacky world of murder for a second? Well, he's the youngest person convicted of a crime or murder in first degree in the history of the Commonwealth in Massachusetts. At his trial, late in his life, Pomeroy still held that he committed the crime. However, his right to due process was forfeited. He was taken to view the body of Mullen, asked if he committed a murder. At the coroner's inquest, he was denied his right to counsel, and in the case of Commonwealth versus Pomeroy was heard in Massachusetts Supreme Court on December 9th and December 10th. And after trial, the Attorney General argued that the verdict guilty of the murder in the first degree in his closing. But it differs from the original charge of premeditation. Nonetheless, he was pronounced guilty on December 10, 1874, and the jury recommended, on the mercy of his account of prisoner's youth, that he get life. His attorney, Charles Robinson, filed 2 exceptions to this rule in February 1875, at which point he was sentenced to hang until dead. So after the trial, it remained for the governor to sign the death warrant of the assigned fate. However, Governor William Gaston refused to comply with this executive responsibility. The only legal means of sparing his life was the governor's council, and it was a simple majority 9-member council that voted to commute the death penalty. The first 2 upheld his execution, and Governor Gaston, I was saying that, refused to sign his death warrant. So, in August 1876, the council took a 3rd vote, anonymously, and Pomeroy was sentenced to life. In 1917, his sentence was commuted to an extent allowing him the privileges afforded to other life prisoners. At first, he resisted, wanting nothing less than a pardon, but he eventually did adjust to a change of circumstances, and he appeared to be a minstrel show in prison. In 1929, by the time he was an elderly man and his frail health, he was transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for the criminally insane, where he would die September 29, 1932. Alright, y'all, that's it for today's episode. I will see y'all next time, and wish me luck with finals coming up.